My name is Elizabeth Shepherd and I'm the Managing Director of Consultancy Division here at Times Higher Education. I have the absolute honour of chairing our session for the next hour. I will be joined after a short presentation by an incredible panel, and I'd like to thank them from the outset for their contribution, their discussion, and their incredible insight. I'll formally introduce our panellists in just a few moments' time after 5 or 6 slides that aim to give you an overview of some incredibly exciting brand new data that we have been able to gather. I want to just offer some information and one caveat before I go through that short presentation. So for the information part, the report that has been exclusively shared with our panellists to get their insights ahead of today's session is available to everybody who's watching this session right now. If you scroll halfway down or 3/4 of the way down the screen where you're watching us right now, in the video box, you will be able to see the report through students' eyes, remote teaching and learning during the pandemic. You'll be able to see that as an attachment just 3/4 of the way down that page. So please download the report, read it whilst we talk, and this may help to inspire any questions that you have about its content. My second piece of information, if you have any questions about the report content, please type them in the chat. My colleagues, Mark Tweddle and Sam Whitaker, who are responsible for the incredible curation and growth of Times Higher Education Student Pulse panel, are online, ready to answer any questions that you have. Research of this nature always garners lots of questions, methodological questions particularly, so if you have any questions of that nature, please type them in the chat and my team will be able to answer them immediately for you. And finally, the caveat. The aim and purpose of the design of this particular piece of research was to reflect, as the title of today's session suggests. We wanted to bring the perspective of students to the World Academic Summit, and we wanted to understand from their perspective the impact of remote teaching and learning, particularly over the past 12 to 18 months on their learning experience. It is with the utmost respect and acknowledgement for the extraordinary hard work of everyone at universities who, under unprecedented and extraordinary situations, flipped almost entirely, in some cases entirely, the teaching and learning of universities to online overnight. My own personal experience of speaking to all of the universities we work with and the university I myself attend understand just how much of a challenge this was. So it's with the acknowledgement of the incredible hard work of teachers and lecturers all over the world, in the world's university community, that we wanted to gain the perspective from students. So how were we able to gain this perspective? As Tim said, here at Times Higher Education since October 2020, we have been gathering the views of our global student community via our online panel. Our online panel is called THE Student Pulse, and this allows us to gather regular and timely evidence on the perspectives of global international students from all around the world. So for this particular exercise, as you will see within the methodology section of the report, we were able to gain the perspective from over 2,200 international students from over 120 countries. This data is completely recent. The fieldwork began in July, was completed in August 2021. So, to share a few high-level insights from the report. First and foremost, we wanted to ask the students participating in this study to rate their experience over the past 12 months of learning either online or in person. And we wanted to ask students who had experienced both the online and in-person experience. And as hopefully you can see on the screen in front of you, that 1 to 10 weighting scale, the online experience was favoured less well than the in-person experience, with the average, the mean score of the in-person experience from the base of students who had experienced that form of teaching rated higher than the online experience. So this really set up the context for us as to what these students had experienced either online or in person. We then wanted to look to the future and ask the total base of our student panellists of just over 2,200 students if one of their first choice universities, thinking of their potential next steps in their higher education journey, announced that all of its teaching would be delivered either in person or online, how positive or negative would they feel? And here you can see we've used a 5-point Likert scale to understand their reflections on their views of the in-person learning experience versus the online learning experience. And I think the findings here really speak for themselves. An overwhelming net positive response of 82% from the total base of participating students to the in-person experience, and a much a mixed picture, but a much more negative response to this question with regard to online teaching. We then, of course, wanted to understand what makes the physical location of a university an attractive study destination. And the findings from this particular question within this survey resonate with much of the data we've collected from students over the past 12 to 18 months. We wanted to ask students, when deciding where to study, which of the following are the 3 most important factors about a university's physical location. And first and foremost, access to educational facilities and the general institutional facilities was rated the most important thing. I think I'd like to thank Sarah and Krishna for their incredible session just prior to this one, where we got some incredible insight from MIT, the magic that we heard about that goes on campus. And I think I take away from this particular slide and the findings that we have seen in this report, similarities to what we heard from the MIT experience, why access to the extracurricular opportunities is so important to students. And finally, we talk often about the new normal and the way in which the global university community can adapt to perhaps the creation of a hybrid teaching and learning model, combining some of the beneficial factors that we have seen emerge from the extraordinary transference of teaching and learning online that was experienced due to the impact of the global pandemic, how that can be combined with the elements of the physical location, the power of the place that we know is so important to the student learning experience. And I think these 3 particular questions and their answers taken from the report really talk at that point. The first, we asked students to say whether they agreed or disagreed with the following statement: on-demand access to recordings of lectures should be available whether teaching is conducted in person and online. And we saw overwhelming agreement to this statement. And again, I go back to the incredible interview we just saw with Sarah and Krishna from MIT, where this seems to be the feedback that all universities are receiving, that this kind of on-demand access to lectures is seen as an incredibly positive thing. However, converse to that and highlighting, most importantly, the power of a place, the power of bricks and mortar. 76% of our student respondents agreed that a physical location and the bricks and mortar campus of a university was important to them. And finally, and I think a very a hot topic, certainly across higher education, value for money. And we wanted to ask our student respondents if the availability of online learning had changed the way they viewed value for money offered by higher education courses. And we saw a slightly lower proportion of agreement to this statement, 59% in total. So some interesting reflections on the data that we gathered via our Global International Student Panel, THU Student Pulse. And it's at this opportunity I would like to welcome each of our panelists. Jose, who joins us from the Monterrey Institute of Technology, who joined us from Mexico Live this afternoon. Jose is the Director of Educational Innovation. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. Susan is the Vice Provost of Academic Programs at the University of Toronto, our host, and it's so wonderful to have you joining us today. Betty is the Chief Content Officer for Coursera. Thank you so much, Betty, for joining us. I'm so excited to hear the perspective of your organisation really truly leading the way in this space. And last but by no means least, Christine. Christine is the Director of Research, Administration and Advancement at the National Open University of Nigeria. Welcome, Christine. I'd like to ask each of our panellists who have seen the report, as each of our delegates can also today, I'd like to ask each of our panellists, starting with Susan, if the findings within this report resonate with your own experiences. Susan.
Yes, thank you very much. They most certainly do. I think that as we went through the pandemic, we observed that students were very hungry for in-person experiences, and particularly opportunities to connect with peers. Building that social interaction into classes, even online classes, became critical. And I think the data that you've shown really backs up the conclusion that students are looking for a university that is technology excellent, has educational technology in a way that supports in-person learning really effectively. They're looking for that sort of high-tech part of educational technology, but only as a piece of in-person. And supporting the in-person experience, particularly the connection between the students and other people, their peers, their mentors, their professors, our staff, and the place that they are located in. And I think that connection to place was something that our students really missed. I would point to actually a piece of data in your report that I found quite compelling, which is that 53% of students found that they enjoyed online learning less. They did not enjoy online learning as much as in person. And while we might think of enjoyment as being a bit of a frivolous metric, I actually think it speaks to mental health. I think it speaks to a sense of that connection and community that they were missing. I think it speaks to the fact that when students are looking for a university, they're thinking about the university experience in terms of an aspirational identity and the development of that aspirational identity. And part of that identity development, especially for 18 to 24-year-olds, which are the majority of our undergraduate population at the University of Toronto, really comes from relationships, networks, connections to peers, opportunities for experiential learning, opportunities for hands-on and connected experiences through co-curricular activities. All of that is critical. But there are some real advantages to online learning, flexibility, and lecture capture that you pointed to. So my role at the University of Toronto really revolves around the academic experience for our undergraduate students and to some degree for our graduate students as well. My portfolio includes quality assurance, but it also includes our central teaching center. It includes thinking about our data systems and administrative systems that support learning. And so how do we support faculty to integrate the best aspects of in-person and the best aspects of that flexible, high-tech opportunity that educational technology offers to support student learning, and bring these together in a way that creates a really exceptional and resilient and flexible experience for our students. And I think we've all learned lessons about resiliency this year in teaching and learning. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you, Susan, so much. I think you're absolutely right. It's been extraordinary, I think, what people have learned with such pace. I love your the idea of an aspirational identity. I think that's certainly something that would resonate with many students as they begin their higher education journey with a university like the University of Toronto. Christine, may I bring you in here and ask what were your thoughts on the findings from this research report?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, and thank you for having me on this panel session. As you know, I'm coming from an open and distance learning institution. So the experience of our students are slightly different because they are already used and primed to learning at a distance. And but the aspect of online learning is something that we had started to embark on a digital transformation journey, actually at the inception of the institution 20 years ago. But it became accelerated during the pandemic. And we, just a few years, fortunately, before then, we had started online facilitation. And we had prepped our students, and we were already offering, like the interactive video sessions you talk about, both synchronous and asynchronous. We had them recorded if they couldn't join live in real time. And then during the pandemic, we moved on to exploring the possibilities of a fully online proctored exam as an option to students. And quite a number of students took advantage of that option. So in looking at the responses of the student in the survey, there are some aspects that resonate, yes, that are similar. For example, obviously the advantages of online learning, convenience, flexibility, which is really part of our mandate as a distance learning institution, that to provide wider access to higher education and at an affordable cost and in a flexible way. So that part really resonated. However, there are some parts that, we sort of had a different experience. For example, when the percentage that was just alluded to by the earlier speaker, we ran a few surveys of our own within the institution, just to get to have an idea of how the students felt about online classes, facilitation, and exams. And I must say that the results were a bit more positive than this survey, is showing. So perhaps we can discuss that later. I also noticed in the survey that in terms of the proportion of teaching and learning that was delivered online across continents, Africa shows the lowest percentage. Obviously, I was looking out for that. And that is not unconnected with the issue of the digital divide. In some ways, the pandemic sort of exacerbated that, widened that gap. But in other ways, it also challenged, countries to begin to think of, how to surmount those challenges. And so I think that for me personally, the issue of a conceptualization of place is important for institutions going forward, be they traditional universities or distance learning universities. Of course, as distance learning universities, we're already, this is what we do. This is what we've been doing pre-pandemic, and this is what we continue to do and to improve on it. So the conceptualization of place is really important going forward, and also the conceptualization of online learning. I've discovered that online learning is a bit, I think when you move from one continent to the other, it's conceptualized a bit differently. And I think when you move from traditional universities to distance learning universities, the conceptualization is also different. But I think all in all, looking at the survey responses, I think perhaps maybe further surveys can be carried out to know exactly, like when students say they enjoyed the online classes less, why would that be the case? If from our experience, if the classes are engaging, are interactive, and they include collaborative activities, that should reduce, that should help, to enjoy it a bit more. I think what happened during the pandemic was that a lot of universities hurriedly pivoted online without basically replicated their classroom classes online. And really from experience, we know that doesn't work very well. And students definitely will not respond very well to that. So maybe I'll just stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. I love your challenge to the findings of the research, and perhaps, from my experience, all research leads to more research. And I think you're absolutely right. Segmenting our audience, perhaps, and looking at your typical student who would attend the National Open University of Nigeria compared to the students that have given their view in the current data set. I'd also like to comment that what we have seen is so many universities around the world looking at the models of excellence, like your own institution, who have the experience that they lacked at the outset of the pandemic. And I think you talk with such obvious authority in this area. So thank you very much, Christine. I'd like to bring in another authority, if I may, Betty, and ask you for your view on this, the data that we've presented, if this resonates with the experience of Coursera.
So in some ways it does, and in some ways it doesn't. I want to take just a minute to describe Coursera, because of course we're not a university, we're a platform. And what Coursera does is takes learnings and content from university and industry partners onto our platform, and then presents that to the 87 million registrants around the globe who are part of our Coursera community. And what we've learned from that is that there are different people who want different things and have different places, and it really enables folks to find what's right for them. My background is in adult education. Prior to joining Coursera, I was the chancellor of Purdue University Global, which is an adult serving university in the United States, completely online. And thinking about that, thinking about the fact that there are 18 to 24-year-olds, and there are also 54-year-olds who are all studying at the same time, I think gives us an understanding of what we have, the opportunities we have, and the challenges we have. There were three main takeaways from the Times research that align with our experience at Coursera, absolutely align. First, students like flexibility, affordability, and stackability of job-relevant online learning. The THE said 34% like the ability to learn at their own pace, 57% are intrigued by the ability to study from anywhere. At Coursera, nearly half, 48% of our learners learn on a mobile device. And for degree students, it's 3 out of 4. Affordability, we are growing our degree programs, the majority of which cost significantly less than the on-campus equivalent at the same institution. And stackability. This one, I think, is the strongest argument for why online learning makes so much sense. Fully 35% of the University of London degree students on our platform also took a certificate from Google IT, and half of our degree applicants were previously registered on Coursera. People build into degrees when they start as adults. The Times Higher Education Survey said 46% were prepared with the skills necessary for their careers. At Coursera, it's much higher. But of course, Coursera learners are much more focused because they've already got jobs. We have professional certificates in 2020. There were nearly 500,000 enrollments. In 2020 so far, we already have more than 1 million. The second point that I think your research made very clear that we have found as well is blended learning is here to stay. The pandemic opened a box, and we're not going to be able to shut that box. Any lecture, anywhere, anytime, of course. It makes so much sense for people to do that part on their own time. People want to continue to learn with digital lectures, and that's what we have found as well. Now, the difference at Coursera is we find that people want chunks. They don't want an hour and a half. They want 5 to 7 minutes at a time. And then the final point is that online learning, no surprise, allows universities to reach a new type of learner, one who might not be able to attend on campus. I've no surprise that 18 to 22-year-olds want to be there. That's part of their life. That's part of growing up. But for us, our learners are 35 on average. They're working professionals. They're not going to go to campus. So we have to provide them with what they need in order to continue to learn, because lifelong learning is one thing that's not going to go away, pandemic or no pandemic.
Thank you so much, Betty. We're going to pick up on your point about blended learning in just a moment, but I'd like to ask Jose, in your role as Director of Educational Innovation, you must have lived and breathed this over the past 18 months, and I'd like to ask your perspective on the report findings and, of course, from your own institution.
Thank you. I want to put this in the context of Latin America because I think it's interesting also to learn a little bit of that. Latin America is the region of the world where the schools, the universities have been closed for the longest time. In a report made in April this year, Latin America had closed schools for 19 days more than the average in the rest of the world. And that number has increased. I don't have the numbers for up to date, but I believe there will be around 120, 160 maybe. So a long time. Just in Mexico, we had the permission for the government to open the schools in June this year. So it's more than a year that the schools and the universities have been closed. So the situation is completely different to other areas in the world. Also, you have to take into account that 50% of the students, or 50% of the population doesn't have access to internet in Latin America. There's a big gap and a big digital gap, and that affects a lot. Another thing that I want to point out is in a study that we did in the Institute for the Future of Education, that I'm the associate director of that institute with the Latin American International Bank. Just before the start of the pandemic in March last year, we finished that study. 3/4 of the faculty in Latin America in higher education say they lack the skills to use technology in their teaching and learning. 3/4. And about half of them said they receive training to do their job as using technology in the classroom, but half of those, that half is only 25% said the training they received was good. So they were developing the right skills. So in this context, it's surprising for me that the results are not that bad from the survey, and it resonates with what we have found also in our own case. So for Tec de Monterrey is a face-to-face university, mainly face-to-face. All our undergraduate degrees are face-to-face. And we have a lot of experience in online learning because around 26,000 of our students take one course online every year, because we believe that students have to take online courses during their stay on the university, because their future of learning will be online in Coursera or in other parts, courses offered by other universities, other providers. So when we shifted in March all the university to, I would say, remote learning, I agree with Christine. This is not what we have been doing is not exactly distance learning. It's more an emergency remote model. The results that we got in Tec de Monterrey are somehow similar to your survey, but I think that they have to be put in context because first, they were done with an incredible effort from faculty and universities around the world, but they were not made on what I will say, this is online learning. This is a way that systematically we do online learning. And second, let's remember that these students register in a face-to-face course, not in an online course, which is a very different situation. So in one of my previous life, I was the dean of the School of Education in Tec de Monterrey that runs online master's degrees programs, very large online master's degree programs. And I remember that we tried 10 years ago to move students to a hybrid model, and we asked them, do you want to go to the campus? If you're in this or this city, you can put a faculty member there and you go to the campus. And what we saw is that very few students showed the first time, and over the time, they didn't show up. So what the students were telling me when we interviewed them, I would summarize like this. What part of I don't want to go to the campus are you not understanding? Because I don't want to go to the campus, that's why I registered in an online course, no? So we have different types of students, no? And we have to acknowledge that we have to serve different types of students. Students that want face-to-face, and students that want online. And I think that the pandemic also has shown the power of hybrid for many. And I think for the big public, no? So many people now understand what I miss from face-to-face. And that's an opportunity that we have right now in front of us. So having in our university also around a quarter of students that register for face-to-face courses, they say that they like their online courses. For me, it's a huge learning that we got there, because we thought that those students that register in a face-to-face course, in a face-to-face program, wanted that, no? And just to finish my participation, one thing that it doesn't resonate with the findings that we have is the networking part of the survey, where you ask the students if they want to be where large groups of students are. I think it's very slow. I think it's around low. It's like 18% or something like that. In our findings, that's one of the things that the students miss the most. I will agree with, I think it was Susan who said that the students are missing the contact, etc. And it's normal because those students are 18, 20 years old, and they want to socialize, and they're in their houses working where they cannot socialize. So we build a number of things to bring socialization for them and to replicate some of the services that the campus offer, no? For instance, one of the things that we did that was very successful is called Boost Your Skills. So in our partnership with Coursera and edX, we offer them additional courses for them that they could take for free. And we quickly viewed that when there were moments of the semester that they don't have exams or projects, the number of registration on those courses and the number of completion on those courses increased a lot. So that's one of the things that I believe that all universities have to think on, offering those opportunities to students so that they take advantage to increase the skill set that they have that is not part maybe of their degree, or to go more in depth in some of those things. One other thing that we do is all the student services in Tech is called LIFE, Leadership and Student Development. It's an acronym in Spanish. And we offer life at home. So we offer a lot of things for them in their houses, including culture, sports, well-being activities for them and for the families to replicate that part. And also spaces for serendipitous encounters with other students. No, for instance, what we want to see, who wants to see a movie, and then 20 students see a movie, and then they get together to talk about the movie. or they talk about whatever subject they have. And in the different majors that we have in Tec de Monterrey, we also use mentors to get a small group of students, around 30 students, so that they can communicate among themselves. So I believe there's a lot of findings here, and I will also agree with Christine that if traditional education, face-to-face, made in a traditional way that is not interactive, that is teacher-led, is not student-centered, I would say if it is boring, it is 4 times more boring using Zoom. So that's what we have when you have an emergency remote learning mode. And many faculty have recognized that in the last year and a half and have increased the number of interactive activities that they are developing on their online courses. And I think that's the way to go, to continue doing that and to understand that we have to serve different publics in the future.
Thank you so much, Jose, for bringing us to the Latin American context. Thank you for sharing with us the situation that you are still experiencing and for sharing those incredible stats. 3/4 of staff lack the formal qualifications to contend with the situation. That, you know, the expectations perhaps of your student community who signed up for a face-to-face course, who are now learning online. I think you've provided us the perfect segue into our next question that I would like to ask each of our panelists. And I will start with Susan again, because Jose has just picked up on some of your original points that kicked off our discussion. We've heard from each of our panelists about the possibility or the attractiveness of hybrid learning, blended learning. We've heard that perhaps we're not quite there yet. And I wanted to ask your view on if you think it will be possible to reach that fully hybrid utopia, and if so, what would that take?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question. So my background is in engineering, and we have a term in engineering called hysteresis. And I've been talking to my faculty and staff about pandemic hysteresis. Hysteresis means that when you change the state of a system and then you change it back, hysteresis, you're not going back to the same place. The history of the system determines where you land. And in engineering, we try and design that out of systems. So when you turn up the volume and you turn it back down, you land in the same place. But we have pandemic hysteresis. And as Betty said, we are not going back to where we were. What we would like to do is actually intentionally go somewhere else rather than drift somewhere else. And so we've been talking a lot about shift versus drift. How do we design that hybrid? Because that is where we will land, but design it in a way that's intentional, that's informed, that helps both our faculty, staff, students make the most of the real gains that we've had in educational technology. We've seen platforms amp up their development during this period of time. The types of online platforms we had a year and a half ago are not the same as they are now. They've all improved. How do we make best use of those? And I think that the data that you had in your report clearly pointed to a couple of obvious ones. We know lecture capture is really critical for accessibility, for flexibility, for resiliency, for a whole range of things, and students really appreciate it. It does not reduce classroom attendance. It actually enhances participation and engagement. But I think there's a number of other opportunities here to build into, intentionally design into our learning ways of making most use of what we have available to us. And Jose talked about things like micro-credentials, and Betty as well, and that's going to be critical. And to Christine's point, different student populations are different, but I think every student is going to benefit from learning how to learn online, because it will be a critical developmental skill for them going into their future and their career.
Gosh, thank you, Susan. Pandemic hysteresis. I hope I've pronounced that incredible terminology. I think that captures it so well. And if my colleague Phil Beatty hasn't already put that on Twitter, I hope he will ASAP. Christine, can I ask your perspective on this? You touched on some really interesting points in your opening, and I'd like just to get your view on it. You mentioned that place was important to the National Open University. What did you mean by that? And what do you think of hybrid learning in the context of what the National Open University of Nigeria was established to do?
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. So what I meant by place, and place means different things to different institutions. For us, we are a national university set up by the government, like I said, to widen access. And so we set out, with the distance learning approach, we currently have over 100,000 students spread across 103 sites, study sites in the country. So when we talk of place, the study sites, is the place, and not, we have a headquarters, but that's not really the place because that's administrative. So our students before the pandemic would primarily connect with their peers and with their with other, use the library facilities, and we have external tutors. They would connect there in those places because they would choose the study sites that are closest to them. However, the conceptualization of place has been changed by the pandemic, and it actually now reflects in our motto. We used to say we work and learn because the emphasis was, on, adult education, adult learning, they're working, and the flexibility of distance learning and now online learning. But now we say that you learn any place at your own pace. So you can see that the shift in emphasis is really on getting people to understand that you can actually connect from wherever you are, and that's what we want you to feel, that we are actually almost like we're right there in your home. And so that for us is place. But I know this will be different for traditional institutions, and that is why I said that institutions would have to really sit and think about conceptualizing what place would mean for them, and secondly, what online learning would mean for them. And this is where blended learning comes in. We are adopting blended learning as an approach. We've been doing that even before the pandemic, but even more so, we've become convinced more so that that is the place to go. So as far as the survey goes, yes, that really resonates well. And but I do feel I will want to stress a point here, and I think Jose had mentioned it, that and I think Susan also mentioned it, about the students learning how to learn online is really very critical. And today you have different webinars and teachings on that, because students need a different set of skills to be able to learn online, and so do the teachers. They need a different set of skills, not only to know how to use the technology, but to know how to design their content for an online context. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Christine. I haven't heard throughout the incredible content throughout the World Academic Summit, I haven't heard place framed in quite the way that you just have. So thank you. A new conceptualization of the importance of place. Incredible. Betty, you mentioned that hybrid learning is here to stay. Coursera obviously supports institutions, millions of learners. How do you see this working in the future?
So I think what's really important for us to think about is we're at a juncture where we can do something very different because of the history we've now experienced. One thing is to say, okay, they want lectures online, let's video some lectures, and then we'll do the rest the way we always have. But there's a real opportunity to think differently about the materials that we share with students and when we share them. One thing that I'd like to talk a little bit about is what happened during the pandemic. During the pandemic, Coursera was free to all university students of campuses around the world. 4,000 institutions took part, almost 3 million students, and there were 24 million enrollments in courses. 70% of that was mobile learning. That was an emergency, and we were there to help, and we did help. However, now things have settled down, and folks are thinking, okay, now what are we going to do next? And some universities are being incredibly creative. For example, KL University in India uses our Coursera for Campus, this opportunity to give the learning materials on Coursera to students for blended and for-credit learning, counting towards an honors credential. KL wanted to increase the number of students who could be honors students, but because of the pandemic, because of their institution, they didn't have the capacity. When they learned about how Coursera could augment what they're doing online, they changed the online piece of what they were offering. And they now have 100% increase in the number of students in honors programs. Wow. Because they have this increased flexibility. And I think that that's the thing that we all have to think about. It's not just, okay, they want their lectures, but let's think about what online materials really entail and what is online best for. Now, from my perspective, online's great for everything. And I believe you can teach anything online with as much enthusiasm and with as much excitement and as Pepe says, lack of boredom as anything else. But you have to prepare, you have to get it right. And in order to be able to do that, you have to be able to scale. To do something for a group of 20 is very different than preparing for a group of 1,000. And that's the excitement of online learning. First off, think more broadly about materials, but secondly, also think about scaling those aspects that you want to keep online.
Gosh, I think if we could learn about scale from any organization, it would be Coursera. That's incredibly exciting, I think. One exciting opportunity you outlined. Jose, you mentioned challenges, the need to upskill, the ways in which you have got to this point throughout the past 18 months. What else do you think that your particular institution will need to offer to meet the expectations of the students to deliver hybrid learning?
Yes, I like the question because it put the student at the center, and I think that's what all universities have to do to put our students at the center. I believe that the expectation of our students in the future is that we will use more technology in the classroom when we come back to face-to-face. They will also want more flexibility for those that like online courses or need more flexibility for that. Even if we already offer a large number of online courses to our students, I think that number of courses will increase. And also hybrid learning. Hybrid learning, not necessarily only using lecture capture. Lecture capture is new for us because we don't have a model where you have a large numbers of students in one classroom. We have at most 30-something students in the classroom, so it was not necessarily cost-effective to lecture capture all the courses. But we will maybe using that, but I don't think that will be overwhelmingly used. It will be more a design where the course is designed to be partly online, partly face-to-face, taking advantage of the best of those worlds. I also think that not necessarily Tec de Monterrey, but in general, more faculty will understand that when they go back to the classroom, and more students will demand that when we go back to a certain normality, we will not go back to the same that we have. We have to go back to something that is better, that is resilient, more resilient, because we will have more of these situations in the future, and we have to be prepared for that. and that the universities have also demonstrated in the last year and a half that we can move faster than we thought we could. No, that with all the bodies that we have inside universities and all the decisions that we have to make, that we could move faster and make the good things of this terrible situation that we're living with the pandemic, make them stay, no, make them stay here, be part of our plan, and prepare all the hardware and training and cultural change, which is very important, that we have to do in our faculty and the publics we serve, our students and the families.
Thank you so much. Goodness me, I can't believe we're at our final 8 minutes of our discussion. It's been such a privilege to be able to talk to all of you this afternoon. I'd like to jump to our next question and use this as our final question. And please, if you'd like to add any comments at this point in this juncture as we head toward the close. For me, I've heard challenges, opportunities. I want to now look to the future and ask each of you, obviously from the unique perspective of your institution or organisation, if you anticipate any changes to how you will present the learning experience, the offer of your institution in the future, capturing the opportunity that the hybrid model or the new way, as we've heard, the new set of expectations that need to be met by the students, by the student community. So if you anticipate the new way you may present the ways in which students can learn with you. I'll start with Susan again, if that's okay.
Sure, yes. I think just very briefly, we've already started to see a huge growth in divisions, our divisions coming forward with micro-credential opportunities, particularly online opportunities that would be taken with a traditional degree or next to a traditional degree. And I think that as we're thinking about how we present opportunities at our institution to students, to prospective students, it will still be about place and interaction, experiential learning, all of those things, but in addition to the use of technology for flipped classrooms, hybrid learning, and I think those stand next to micro-credentials that will become a critical part of the offerings that we will have going into the future.
Great. Do you think that will need explaining, Susan? Do you think this will need to be clearly articulated? The language used will need to be explained?
To some degree, but our students are used to the concept of minors, certificates. Okay. There's a variety of things that have existed in-person learning that have been these kinds of things. Making them online or presenting them as online makes them more flexible, makes them more accessible for students. We can offer them while they're off on work terms. They're off on a work term, they can do a certificate. There's lots more opportunities there, and I think our divisions are already imagining some fantastic opportunities for students in that realm.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. I'd like again to go to Christine and ask, you mentioned your motto, and it seemed to resonate perfectly with this. You've obviously given this a huge amount of thought, but your thoughts to the future of communicating what the possibilities of the National Open University to them.
Yes, I've talked about, the shift and adopting blended learning. I wanted to say that our students cut across, all the age groups, from 16 to 45. So that means that we're looking to providing options in terms of formats and how to be able to cater for the different learning styles across those age groups. So we still keep print, our print materials, okay, which we started with as a distance learning institution, but now designing them in a way that can also be in a blended way, and that can be used in an online context. We're looking also to integrating more of reflective learning that will lead to deep learning, because we feel that, students, need, the knowledge, the competencies, and the skills for the future of work. And we all know about that. Apart from the pandemic, the fact that we're, in the fourth industrial revolution phase. Incidentally, we have been talking with Coursera. I'm sure Betty will be happy to hear that. So we are looking to also, introducing students to Coursera. We have a Center of Excellence that's sponsored by the World Bank, and that's part of, some of the innovations going forward. So essentially, it's really to provide students with well-rounded learning that would engage them. So because student engagement is really very key when you talk about blended learning space and in the online learning space. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christine. Betty, there seems not one corner of the world that Coursera hasn't touched. Your 1 minute reflections on the future and what that looks like.
So for us, the future is now. We believe that it's incredibly important to help institutions develop hands-on learning in an online environment. And we already have more than 1,900 guided projects. So these are little projects that students can complete in an hour to learn a particularly direct skill or sub-skill. How to create a graph in Excel, how to create a basic web page. Those are the kinds of things that we need to do to augment online learning so students get a sense of the activity rather than just the theory. And that's where we're focused and working very, very hard. We want to help universities bring online the best of what they have in their face-to-face environments.
Thank you. I love that idea of the activity and the theory. Jose, the final minute to you. The future for the tech and engaging those students in what has been an incredibly difficult situation.
Yes, in 2019 we started a big change in our university and educational model. So our new model for the incoming students of that year is based on challenges, real-world challenges that they have to solve with real-world clients. It's a competency-based model where the students are engaged in solving those challenges, guided by faculty. And what we have seen during the pandemic is that the students that are in the new model compared to those that aren't rate better their online experiences. So when you said what I envision for the future is a more engaging online experience where the students are active and have a more meaningful learning experience. So I will close there for the time.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. That leaves me with the final task of thanking each of you very genuinely from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Christine, Susan, Betty, and Jose. And I've enjoyed your insight so much, and I know that our delegates at the World Academic Summit will have too. Thank you so much for joining us.